what I'd like to start out with is another video that touches on the history of the OIF Foundation. So we'll kick off with the video and move on into our speakers. Speaker tonight is, as I said, co-chair of the OIF Florida Support Group along with Gail Bunker. She's a former board member. She is chair of the Bone China Tea event and a frequently requested speaker at OI events, just like the conference earlier today. Please welcome Susie Wilson.
Well, it's great to see everyone here this evening, celebrating the Osteogenesis Imperfecta Foundation's 50th anniversary. It's truly been an amazing honor for me to be an active volunteer in the organization, all because of one woman's dream, an amazing vision and legacy. Although the event is a year later due to COVID, and not the way we originally all planned it, but we're here tonight to celebrate, honor, and remember a wonderful woman, mother, and a friend, and the founder of the OIF Foundation, Gemma Geisman. All of us in this room, those of us with OI, and those of us who are parents and born us, or adopted us, although on that particular day, on whatever side you're on, for the most part, back 50 years ago and even longer, whoever gave birth to us had never heard of OI, didn't know what OI was, and didn't even know how to pronounce it, or how it happened, or what caused it, and were totally perplexed by it, as well as their doctors. Many of us this day were born with multiple fractures, or would later get diagnosed after a couple of years. Many doctors were perplexed. Many of us had institutions that didn't know what to do with us. And these families felt isolated and alone without any answers available. But it took one special person, Gemma, who after giving birth to their son, Mike, knew and experienced those feelings all too well. Gemma took it upon herself to write an article in the Red Book magazine in the March issue of 1968. And not only because she was an amazing writer and loved to write, but because she wanted to find out if there were other women out there with babies or children or adults who also had the same disability. Gemma wanted to find out if there were others experiencing the same isolation and loneliness that she and Dick felt when their son Mike was born. As we're all aware, OI is a rare bone disorder, and she figured she might hear maybe from 1 or 10 people from the Red Book magazine article. But little did she know what amazing world she had opened up when the mailman started to drop off truckloads of letters from people all over the United States and around the world. Becky Keller and Mitch Peck and Renee Gardner were the first moms to reach out to Gemma right away, and they grew a fast friendship. In 1969, with the help of Dr. Solomon, who treated Becky Keller in Colorado, and son, and Dr. Edward Millar, an orthopedic surgeon at Shriners in Chicago, who treated Mike, the two mothers got together, and they got the two doctors together, and that started the first OI clinic at Shriners in Chicago. Over those 2 years, Gemma wrote a newsletter, to those that were not able to attend or go to the clinic in Chicago. In 1970, Gemma wrote a second article in Red Book magazine, and that was titled Epilogue to a Dream. That article explained what had happened since her original article 2 years prior. After that second article, Gemma received more letters from other OI moms, and one in particular was Rosalind James, whose son Stuart was 3 months old at the time. The letter that Roz wrote to Gemma meant a lot to Gemma, and she kept that letter for over 25 years. She reached out to Roz right away, and after receiving that letter, they became the best of friends throughout the whole 50 years and beyond. Roz did ask me tonight to pass on her regrets, as she really wanted to be here. She and I now talk on a weekly basis ever since COVID. In 1970, they did a mini conference in Chicago. And in August of 1970, the OI Foundation was incorporated. How lucky are we all that Gemma Geisman was the pioneer to pave the way and start this foundation over 50 years ago. When I was born in August of 1968 with 2 broken legs and a broken arm at Greenwich Hospital in Greenwich, Connecticut, The orthopedic doctor who'd been assigned to my case just started working there the week before, and he'd come from Columbia Presbyterian from New York City, where he had treated some OI patients. How lucky was I? So he knew what OI was and how to treat my fractures. My family and I were incredibly lucky. Since I was Dr. Worcester's patient, only he didn't know where the foundation was. My parents did take me to consults at Hospital for Special Surgery. And although there were many other OI families there and patients that were treated there, it never seemed to be on the same day that I would go. So we never met. But over those years, I grew older and I wanted to meet other OI patients or other OIers, but I didn't know how. The internet wasn't thought of. So I didn't know there was an OI Foundation. And I was the only patient for my doctor. He didn't know there was an OI Foundation. It wasn't until I graduated from Manhattanville College in 1992 and had missed my graduation due to a femur fracture that my parents bought me a computer, and that was when the internet first started. And after that fracture, I came home and we converted our dining room into a bedroom. I couldn't get up to my bedroom. And they bought me a computer. And I remember typing in AOL, Osteogenesis Imperfecta. Sure enough, thinking the computer's gonna be like, what is this girl talking about? Lo and behold, I found the OI Foundation and I reached out right away. I spoke with Mary Beth Huber, who was the information educator resource specialist, and she immediately put me in touch with Rosemary Casper and Joanne Birkenbush, who were head of the New Jersey OI support group. And Joanne, you're here tonight, and because of you, I've come so far. Changed my life forever. I became a member of the New Jersey support group, and in 1996, my parents and I attended our first national OI conference in Orlando, Florida. I'll never forget that weekend for as long as I live. That weekend, I met Gemma and Roz James, and I also met some of my best friends that weekend, and the relationships I still have today. Even though I know I'm not a parent, I feel being able to pick up the phone and being able to call friends with OI who can relate to my frustrations and disappointments is a wonderful joy. I mean, how many friends can you call and tell them about falling in a washing machine head first with your feet sticking out and you try yelling for help? Have you ever tried yelling inside a washing machine? That goes off all the wheels. Or when I was on the board of directors and Jamie Kendall was president, and we're about to have a hurricane, and I'm now living in Florida. No, the hurricane didn't come to Florida. It went to DC, and Jamie says, oh, you're not going to cancel the flight, are you? Like, okay, I'll fly up a day in advance. So I fly up in a day in advance. Jamie and I arrive at the hotel, and we're trying to unload her car out of the back of her trunk. And she doesn't have the push button to put the trunk down. No, Jamie Kendall, who's 3 feet tall like me, has a rope on the back of her trunk. So she goes to pull on the rope from her wheelchair. And I've got my walker, at that time I was walking. And I go to pull on the rope to help her down. The next thing you know, the two of us are hanging from a rope on the back of the trunk of the car. And people in the parking lot of the hotel are like, and the wind's blowing 80 miles an hour. Like, how many times can you experience this, you know? Or when we all travel, there's 3 of us, and it used to be Jamie Kendall and myself and Susie Richard. And I was always the one that was like overcautious, didn't want to travel, didn't want to go anywhere. So I was known as Good Susie. And then you have Susie Richard, who was like totally like rebellious, like, we're not gonna do what the parents say, we're just gonna go wing it. And that was my first travel experience by myself without my parents. Flying into DC and Jamie and Susie Richard taking me to a festival down in DC, and there were so many people. All we saw were butts. So we then started to put together a train and like weave in and out so we could stay together because we were so worried we were gonna lose each other. And people in the crowd were like, oh my God, there's little munchkins. They're so cute. We want to take them home. And we're like, yeah, you really don't want to take them home. But after that national conference, all kidding aside, Gemma and Roz immediately reached out to me and asked me to be part of the foundation. I was truly honored to serve on the board of directors with Gemma and Roz. And also, I know that Gail Holmes and I were very lucky to have both Gemma and Roz be part of our support group. I'm honored to be part of this organization and all that it's taught me. It's provided me leadership experience and support over these last 30 years of my life. Gemma and I are truly thankful for you because if it hadn't started the foundation, none of us would be here tonight to honor you. So thank you, Gemma, for all your dedication and your unbreakable spirit. We all miss you. We're very grateful here tonight to the OI Foundation that Gemma's family supported her and cheered her on as she started the OI Foundation. And we thank them for the very important part they played. So at this time, I would like to introduce and turn this over to Cathy Bowen, Gemma's daughter, who will share her memories of her mom and our family.
So good evening, everybody. My name is Cathy, and I'm the firstborn child of Gemma and Richard Geisman. And I would like to thank all of you for being here this evening, whether in person or virtually, to celebrate and honor the life and legacy of my mom, Gemma, and to finally be able to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the Osteogenesis Imperfecta Foundation. So as you heard, officially the foundation was incorporated in August 21st of 1970, and that is the date that is celebrated as the beginning of the foundation. However, for our family, the seed for the foundation was planted long before that. On a Friday the 13th in April of 1956, my brother Mike was born into our family. His was a breech birth that resulted in more than 40 fractures to his tiny little body. Many people consider Friday the 13th as an unlucky day, but for our family and the future OI Foundation, it turned out to be good luck that Mike was born that day to our parents. When Mike was born, Mom was only 22 years old and Dad was 23. They were handed this fragile little baby and told to bring him home and that he probably wouldn't live long. My parents did take Mike home that day, but they had other ideas for my brother. When they were faced with this challenge, they worked together as a team, which led to a partnership of teamwork that lasted their entire married life. That was the beginning of the foundation for our family. My mom was an avid reader, so it was nothing to have McCall's magazine, Ladies' Home Journal, Reader's Digest, Good Housekeeping, and of course Red Book magazine all over the coffee table in our living room. In those days, Mom stayed home to take care of the children and the house while Dad went to work. Because of his disability, no one was willing to take Mike for play dates or daycare, and he was not permitted to go to school. The Americans with Disabilities Act was not signed in until July of 1990. So Mom was responsible for all all of his daily care. Once Mike began being tutored at home and the rest of us had started in school, Mom finally had some time to consider pursuing her own dreams. One of those dreams was to become a writer, so she subscribed to the Writer's Digest. And it was there that she found out about the famous writers' school in Westport, Connecticut. It was a very exciting day in our house when the first package came from the school and it contained a large 3-ring binder and her very first assignment. You would have thought that she received a box of gold. She was so excited and could not wait to get started. That year at Christmas, Dad gave Mom her first manual typewriter to make it easier for her to write her stories. Mom spent many days and some evenings typing away, working on her assignments. Being self-taught, she used only the index finger of each hand, but boy, could those fingers fly. By 1965, Mom had completed most of her assignments for the writer's school and had started being published in several small magazines. Her stories were always about her family, about growing up in northern Maine in a family with 13 children, about her brother, the missionary in Vietnam, and many other family stories. One day, she was reading the most recent issue of Red Book magazine, and she came to the end of the young mother's story and saw the how to submit your story at the end of the article. And it read something like, Red Book would pay $500 if you submitted your article, your young mother's story. And it could be anything that was related to you as a mother, as a wife, a concerned citizen. And the manuscript should be 1,000 to 2,000 words. And you could send it to the Red Book magazine in New York, New York. Well, $500 was a whole lot of money back in those days for an article in a magazine. So Mom decided to give it a try. It took a lot of courage for Mom to put her feelings about raising a child with OI on paper and then submit it to a national magazine. In April of 1967, Mom received an official letter from Kathleen Dunnigan, who was an associate editor of Red Book. The letter read, "Thank you for sending my Prison of Dreams to our Young Mother's Story series. We all found it very moving and compellingly honest, and would like to be able to publish it in the series." Little did Mom know, at that very moment, the course of her life had been dramatically shifted, and she was now on the path to starting what is now the Osteogenesis Imperfecta Foundation. The next letter from Red Book told her that the story was to be published in the March 1968 issue of the magazine. This began a long relationship between my mom and the people at Red Book magazine. All of a sudden, we were famous. We were just a simple family from a small Midwestern town in Ohio, and a crew of people from a big New York City magazine wanted to come to our house and talk to us and take some formal family pictures. We couldn't believe it. When the team came, they brought with them a large bag of mail that they had received from people all across the country wanting to write or to talk to Mom. One such letter said, "Gentlemen, in your March issue, 1968, page 60, a story by Gemma Geisman. Please, could you send me her address? Our son is similarly afflicted, and I would like very much to get in touch with her." It was signed Becky and Charles Keller. Another said, "Dear editor, I would like very much to have the address of Mrs. Gemma Geisman, who told her young mother's story in the March issue. She and I have a little boy with very similar circumstances, and I am sure the same disease. My son would like to correspond with him. That one was signed by Renee Gardner. Once the March magazine hit the newsstands, the letters started pouring in from all over the country. We got airmail from California, letters from New Mexico, Oregon, Iowa, and New Hampshire. The amazing thing, as you can see on the screen, most of them were just addressed to Mrs. Gemma Geisman or to Gemma Geisman, Van Wert, Ohio. There was no street address, there was no zip code. I wonder if they get delivered today. Mom answered every single letter that she received. Many were desperate for a connection with someone else with an OI child, and others were from adults with OI who knew of no one else like themselves. Our house quickly became the hub of correspondence, which after a time became very overwhelming. It was difficult for Mom to keep up with. Eventually, Mom started sending some letters to Mitch Pack to help to answer them. And Becky was working on spreading the word about Dr. Clive Solomons and his research, and Renee was lending her support wherever they needed her to do it. These four ladies had become fast friends, and we talked about them at our dinner table at home as though they were part of our family, even though we'd never met them. It quickly became evident that they needed to find a more efficient way to share the information with their growing list of contacts. Mom, being the writer, suggested that they start a quarterly newsletter. On the left-hand side of the screen, you will see the very first issue of the newsletter, which at that time was called the Osteogenesis Imperfecta newsletter. It was published in February of 1970. It advised parents of the work being done by Dr. Edward Miller of Shriners Hospital in Chicago and the research being done by Dr. Clive Solomons in Colorado. It also encouraged anyone wanting to be pen pals with other OI families that they could send their information to the newsletter address, which was our home address. While preparing for this evening, I came across something that Mom had written called How Breakthrough Got Its Name. This was the first time that I had seen this article, but I remember the incident very well. By 1970, my brother Mike was 14 and attending junior high school via an intercom system. You can see it there sitting on his desk in his home schoolroom. It was my job at the school to go to each classroom and get the intercom from his class and bring it to his next class before getting to my own classes. One day, Mike had been assigned to give an oral presentation for his speech class. Mom advised him to dress in his best school clothes, like he would if he were speaking in front of an audience. When it was Mike's time to talk, Mom held down the button on the intercom so he could present his speech. According to Mom, Mike was eloquent one minute and very humorous the next. When the presentation was over and the button was released, there was only silence in the classroom. The teacher apologized and said, "I'm sorry, Mike, but we ran out of time and the bell rang in the middle of your presentation." Mike had been speaking to an empty classroom. The teacher said she was giving him an A+, but Mike felt that she was just doing it because she felt sorry for him. Feeling very furious, my mom went into her office to work on choosing a name for the newsletter. She had written down some possible titles earlier in the day. When she looked at the list, the word breakthrough stood out to her. The Webster's Dictionary described the word as an offensive operation that pierces a defensive system and reaches an unorganized area behind it. Mom wondered if they would ever be able to mount an offensive strong enough to pierce through the many layers of apathy associated with rare disabilities like osteogenesis imperfecta. She saw the newsletter as her instrument for breaking down those barriers. Therefore, the newsletter was christened Breakthrough. Mom then asked my dad, who was a very talented in drafting and drawing, to draw up the masthead for the newsletter. On the right side of the screen, you will see the second edition of the newsletter with the new name and the masthead created by both my parents. I have a very vivid memory of sitting at our kitchen table and watching my dad working with paper, pencils, and rulers and drawing up the new logo. My parents made a great team. Exactly 2 years after the first article came out in Red Book, Mom sent the editors an update on everything that had happened since the March 1968 issue. That was printed as Epilogue to a Dream in the March 1970 issue. By this time, Mom had established a relationship with several of the editors of the magazine. And so it was no surprise that in June of 1971, Cy Chesler, who was the leading editor of the magazine, wrote to my mom and asked her to tell the story of the OI Foundation. That was published in December of 1971 as the Progress Report, and Cy Chesler became a member of the OI Foundation's Board of Directors. April 22nd, 1970. That was the very first time that Gemma, Becky, Midge, and Renee met in person. The meeting in Chicago was originally meant as only a means for these four families to meet each other and to meet the doctors Miller and Solomons. However, a huge influx of letters and requests for help and for something to be organized made it evident that it was to become much more. The first families that met that day and organized, assigned officers, and decided to officially incorporate as a nonprofit organization were as follows: Richard and Gemma Geisman with their son Mike, Renee and Don Gardner and their son Donnie, Becky Keller and her sons Joe and Doug. Her husband Charles had to stay home and run the ranch. Roy and Mildred Burdett and their son Brooke, Midge and Dewey Peck and their son Art, and Bob Lutzinger. Also in attendance were Drs. Clive Solomons, Dr. Edward Miller, and Dr. Ott. The doctors were there for the clinic with the OI families and did not attend the private meeting held later in the day by the families. At this meeting, the first national officers were elected. Mr. and Mrs. Roy Burdett of Hogansville, Georgia became the presidents. Mr. and Mrs. Robert Lutzinger of Fremont, California were elected vice presidents. Mrs. Charles Becky Keller of Longmont, Colorado was the secretary. Mr. and Mrs. Don Gardner of Huntsville, Alabama became treasurers. And Mrs. Richard Gemma Geisman of Van Wert, Ohio was chosen to be the public relations officer because of her work with Breakthrough and her connections with the editors at Red Book. Me and my brother Mike. I was only 14 days away from my second birthday, the day that Mike was born. At first, everyone kept telling me to stay away, don't touch the baby. Mike was getting a lot of attention, and his care required a lot of time because of the nature of his illness. My parents did everything they could to involve me and make me a part of taking care of him so that I would not feel left out. I, like my mom, liked to read. So when Mike was fussy, I got to read to him. Now, keep in mind, I was just around 2. I probably was just reading the pictures and making things up. But he seemed to calm down when he heard my voice reading to him. Once the Red Book article came out and Mom became so very busy with all the letters and phone calls, I helped my dad with the younger kids. I was learning to cook in home ec, so I got to practice on the family. Imagine what that was like. Once Breakthrough was in full production, I can remember sitting at the kitchen table and helping to fold and prepare the newsletter for mailing. You all said it was a kitchen table enterprise at the beginning. After the second article came out in Red Book, Mom started being invited to speak to local groups. I can remember her very first speaking engagement to a local ladies club. She was so nervous that she fainted in front of them all. Dad got the call saying that he needed to come and get her. And by then I had my driver's license, so I had to go with him so I could drive Mom's car home. But this didn't stop her from accepting many more speaking engagements. Eventually, she was able to get up in front of hundreds at the OI national conferences. I don't think she ever really got over the nervousness, but she was really good at faking it. When Mom's book was published, I helped her organize a night with the author at the clubhouse in the community in Florida where she was living. I was the moderator of the program, and Mom was a huge success. Sorry, I need a drink. My sister Cindy was unable to be with us this evening, but I asked her if she'd like to share a few words with you, and here is her message. Growing up with a brother with OI taught me a whole lot about many things in life, but one of the things it taught me was self-advocacy and self-determination. One of these life lessons stands out in my mind. When we were kids, our church had a carnival and our whole family was excited about going. They were going to have games with prizes, bingo, snow cones, and popcorn. When we got to the carnival, there were lots of kids there, and many of them started staring at us and made comments to their parents. One of those parents came over to my dad and said that my brother Mike was scaring the kids because of how he looked and that we should leave. Mike's face became sullen, and I looked on with dismay. We had been looking forward to the carnival for weeks. My dad looked that guy right in the eye and said, "Nope, my kids have a right to be here just like you and your kids." I let out a big sigh of relief, and Mike smiled from ear to ear as my dad pushed his wheelchair over to the fishing booth. Growing up in the 60s in a small town had its challenges, but it was people like my mom and dad and the other families that you celebrate tonight who helped change attitudes about access and equality for people with disabilities. While there is still work to be done, know that all of you can stand proud and continue to say, we have a right to be here. My younger brother Rick was also not able to attend, but he would like to share these thoughts with you. What was it like growing up in the house where the foundation was created? The only word I could come up with was normal. I was only 8 or 9 when the foundation was being created by Mom and the other members. I grew up with the foundation. All I knew was that my older brother Mike was in a wheelchair and was smaller than everyone else. He was cool, and he loved baseball and football just like I did. Normal. My childhood was normal. Sure, my mom was on the phone almost every night with Nelda, Bach, or Roz. Yes, we knew them all by first name, but Mom was also up every morning, making sure that we had breakfast, Our homework was done and whatever else we needed for the day ahead. We went on vacations and Dad would prop Mike up on a boat cushion so he could see, and my sister Cindy and I would fight over who had to sleep on the car floor with the hump. My parents worked hard to make our lives as normal as possible. My parents were at the forefront of the concept that having OI or any disability does not prohibit you from living life to the fullest. So I guess my answer to the question about what it was like growing up with the foundation in my life would be that it taught me never to say never, that every individual is capable of achieving great things, that one's disability does not define them, that if you want something and you work hard enough, you can achieve it. It also taught me compassion and understanding. My mom set a great example for me and my siblings. In my working career, I have worked for both the American Cancer Society and the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation. My sister Cindy has spent most of her professional life working in social service positions and now works in the vocational rehabilitation program for the state of Texas to help people with disabilities get the education and training they need to get good jobs. My brother Rick is currently the social rehabilitation counselor at a social club and learning center for people with mental illness. He runs groups on a daily basis and is constantly preaching the concept that you can't let your disability define you. Mom was a young mother in a small Midwestern town. She had a high school diploma and was incredibly smart. While I was preparing for this program for you tonight, I was also reading James Patterson's newest book about his life. And I would like to share this little piece directly from his book. He says, I have given 10 college commencement speeches. I change the content each time, but a theme I love is the power of stories. My mom was a brilliant storyteller. It took a lot of courage for her to tell her story of living with Mike and osteogenesis imperfecta. But if she had not told that story, we would not be here today, celebrating the 50th anniversary of this wonderful organization. Since 1968, my mom has saved all the letters that she received from all the families that read her articles. This is her original file. These are every one of the letters. It's alphabetical order by the last. This file traveled with Mom from Ohio to New Hampshire to Florida and back to New Hampshire. It was with her until the day she passed away in 2020. These were not fan letters. They were the stories of all the families that reached out to her. When Mom passed away, the foundation asked us, her children, how they might best honor Mom, and we came up with the idea of Gemma's Corner. My mom's story changed thousands of lives. Your story might also change someone's life. I would like to ask that each of you record your OI story and submit it to the OI Foundation for Gemma's Corner and honor Mom's legacy in a very meaningful way. If you need help with this, you can contact Jessica at the foundation office. You can email her at jransom@oif.org. We all have a story to tell, and I appreciate so much you listening to my family's story this evening. Thank you much. My mom would be very happy to see all of you this time. Now, in order to give the closing remarks for this evening, I would like to introduce you to Bob Phillips. Bob?
Abe Lincoln used to write notes on the back of postcards. So tonight, I got a napkin. I was told to be brief, but how I'm honored to be asked to do a wrap up of Gemma Geisman's contribution to OI. I'm so thankful to have this opportunity, and for her energy and interest in writing an article to Red Book. Somebody from Van Wert, Ohio, it's a little dinky little town in northwest Ohio. She had the courage, and Richard supported her, to go ahead and submit an article. And as we said in 1968, that article was actually published. And the response was awesome. It was so great because she found out she was not alone. There were families that had the same condition and didn't know what the hell to do. They didn't know about Bruce Clark. They didn't know about fractures. They just thought, well, this is it. But Gemma opened the door to that opportunity. And so let's give her another round of applause. In June of 1970, my wife Linda and I were invited to the Shriners Hospital in Chicago, which I was actually a former patient from 1944 to 57. And I knew Dr. So I knew Dr. Miller. By the way, it's Millar and not ER, because he was very touchy about Miller. Anyway, both those Greek doctors, that day of June of 1970, he invited me to his office. And he said, what a great opportunity today. Now, Bob, you're a former patient. Can you give us some information so we can honor Gemma Geisman? And I said, well, Doc, I said, I just met her today, but I do know, having OI since 1942, I am going to be very supportive when it comes to boot. So we had the great honor and opportunity to recognize Gemma Geisman. And I right away felt the warmth love of this wonderful woman, that what she been able to accomplish just by writing an article. So them and Richard invited me to the home in Van Wert, Ohio. And then they moved on to New Hampshire. And then I got to meet them there. And then they retired in Sebastian, Florida, which is on the East Coast. And each time they were warm and welcome. And it just so happened because Bob Phillips had the opportunity to be there the same day, June 1970, when the whole organization really got recognized in the research, the medical field, and the family support. So they are such a great family to have met and associated. The love and extended to them actually got us more involved in the OI Foundation. I became area coordinator in Eastern Iowa, in all of Illinois, for Dr. Schultz. You just can't sit there and be silent. So we did that, my wife and I. And then I had an opportunity to move to Florida, in Tampa, and a job exchange at Shriners Hospital. And then from that, then we got involved more in the Florida support group. And I got on the board of directors. Oh, God, what was I getting into? And I want to explain one critical meeting in 1984. I know Ross James is watching. That particular board meeting could have made or break what we do today. And what happened at that meeting would Gemma announce, I've been doing this for 14 years, and I want to slow down. I would wish, and my goal is that someone come forth to volunteer to take over. At that time, we didn't call it executive director, just leadership of the OIF Foundation, the breakthrough. And lo and behold, we had this meeting in Grand Rapids, Michigan. And there was Grace, what's the last name? Grace. And her daughter was sitting there with a Bible. She's reading the Bible. We started opening meeting with Gemma calling it to order. And so what did Bob do? I said, excuse me, I think before we start this meeting, we need to have a prayer. So Bob comes across with a volunteer prayer to have the good Lord be with us and it offer guidance to the success of the OIF Foundation. Then the meeting started. And lo and behold, Ross James from New Hampshire suggested that I would consider replacing Jim. And then a couple others started coming through. So let me tell you, in 1984, we could have made a break what we're doing today. Breakthrough came through. We now are still celebrating 50 years of celebration. So the next thing, I'm sitting next to Pat McNeil's father, and he said, you're a CPA. We need some accounting at Memorial. Would you volunteer to be treasurer? So next year, I get a little national treasurer. Do you know how much money was in the bank of the OIF Foundation? 27,000. 27,000. Now, how can we expand on such to make what we have today? What was the dedication of the board of directors and now reaching out to NIH, a couple other funding companies, like where we are today. So let's speak then 1970, 1984, and now 2022. Okay, so in summary, I just want to let you know the struggles, the success, and the accomplishments of dedicated people. Now, I moved to Florida in Tampa in '87, and now we got to meet the friends over here that really started the Florida support group. And we already had the NIH and the New York group and all the Northeast support, but it was just support of everyone with the love and dedication to Little Bone success. So tonight, I recognize that I'm going to be 80 years old. It's kind of scary, 50th anniversary, but I was 30 at the time the thing started. So God bless everybody, and let's live on, and let's give a big hand to Gemma Geisman.
Wonderful evening. I cannot tell you how new to me are some of the nuances that parts of the story growing up in a family that unbeknownst at the time, but now very well known to us, starting something that was so important to each of us individually. So for that, I thank you. And I wish everyone a good night.